That is number 4 Alabama at Wisconsin, another noon game on Fox. The storyline to know for this game is, okay, was that game against USF, was it a fluke for Alabama like it was last year? Because for the second year in a row, Alabama's game against USF came down to the wire. And you made the joke to me when we were watching the game upstairs, like, Alabama will never, ever schedule South Florida.
There's something about the Bulls in Tampa. There's something about them.
They'll never do it again. Listen, the Crimson Tide had a 5-point lead over South Florida with under 6 minutes to go before scoring 3 straight touchdowns to get a 42-16 win. Ironically, almost covered the spread. Even though they had a 5-point lead with they entered the game with 33.5-point favorites. They almost covered the spread, winning by 26 in this game. Last year, the Crimson Tide beat South Florida 17-3 in what was a one-score game before Alabama scored a touchdown with under a minute left in that one. And many, and remember you were on the show too, including us, we were saying, oh boy, this Crimson Tide offense is in trouble. And we don't know if they can make the college football playoff. We don't know if they're a playoff contender anymore. After that, though, Nick Saban and Jalen Monroe rattled off 10 straight victories, including an SEC championship win over Georgia to make the college football playoff. So the question is, okay, last year's game against South Florida was proven to be a fluke. Is this year's game against South Florida proven to be a fluke again? And can Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Monroe have the same success as Milroe and Saban did last year?
I think they will. I think Alabama's going to come out and look better. There's just got to be something about USF, right? Like I don't know what. I know they have Byron Brown, and it's funny because in those 2 games, USF has played better defense than basically at any point in the last year and a half. It's the strangest thing. Like, their 2 best games on defense, except maybe the bowl game against Cuse, because, well, I had to bring that up, have come against Alabama. So, I mean, it's a strange dynamic. And last year there was a bit of the excuse, too, where they benched Milroe for that game. Right. This time they had Milroe in there, and it still was kind of ugly. And I think the one thing with Milroe that USF did, they learned from Michigan, is they blitzed him a lot. And I think that's a big key. That could be a big key in this game against Milroe if Wisconsin decides to send heavy pressure.
Dalton, the other quarterback in this game is Tyler Van Dyke, and honestly, Wisconsin hasn't looked great in their first 2 games either. So what should we be looking out for when Wisconsin and TVD have the ball?
So Tyler Van Dyke's got a huge arm too, right? He's another quarterback with just an absolute cannon for an arm. I just don't know who can win downfield so he can use it. Through 2 games against South Dakota and Western Michigan, they have completed 2 passes that have gone at least 15 yards in the air, and both of them were against South Dakota with like major coverage busts. Especially there was the first one, I believe, that might have gone for a touchdown. Basically, they just forgot to cover the receiver. So it's a problem. It's been a problem since Wisconsin has gone to more of a spread offense, and they used to get in the eye on fullbacks and tight ends and all of that. But they're having a problem winning downfield, and you look at them since the start of last year, they're just in receiving grade and reception, everything downfield just not working. 15-plus yard receptions max. They only have 36 since the start of last year, 15th fewest in the Power 5. 54th out of 70 in receiving grade. They don't get a lot of yards after the catch. I'm watching the Western Michigan tape and going, who's getting open here? They didn't complete a single ball over 15 yards. Who gets open downfield? Because this is the problem is you have receivers that can't separate downfield. But you have a quarterback that really his strength is throwing it vertically. Yeah. The best throws that we saw from him at Miami were downfield and standing in the pocket and kind of that old school. I mean, I think about guys like Brad Johnson and pocket quarterbacks like that want to zip it down the field. It looks so far like they don't have the weapons. Very much like last year when they were 113th in receiving grade, they don't make big plays. And I understand it's Wisconsin and they're a cold weather team and offensive line and running the ball and all of that, but they're trying to spread it out more. The problem is it feels like defenses aren't taking that as much of a threat. There are reps when Western Michigan's in man coverage, and they're the ones winning.
Yeah.
And honestly, without some mistakes on Western Michigan's part, they may have lost that game. So I think Wisconsin has a problem creating big plays, and Alabama for years and years, even now without Nick Saban, but with Nick Saban, they're one of the best teams at preventing explosive plays, right? That's the one thing they do is make you work for it, right? So, look, they were second in the nation in coverage grade last year. They're tied for 6th through 2 games this year. I don't think Alabama's secondary and their back end's going anywhere. They have a ton of good athletes, and I don't know that they're going to have a particularly hard time figuring out a way to cover these Wisconsin receivers.
The biggest weakness in our team preview for Wisconsin entering the year was pretty obvious. It was the receiving core, and it's proven to be the case so far. So, yeah, that's definitely a matchup to look out for. And on the other side of the ball, it's almost the same thing. Jalen Milroe and Alabama's receivers against a pretty good Wisconsin secondary. So we mentioned Milroe before. He really struggled to do anything against South Florida this past week. He had a 50.7 overall grade, 49.5 passing grade. That's the lowest he's had over the last 2 years. You got to go back all the way when he was a backup to Bryce Young to find lower grades from Milroe, honestly. And he consistently, in that game against South Florida, missed deep receivers time after time after time. And once again, was rough against the blitz. 44.7 passing grade against the blitz, which was 44.7 in this game. And last year, he was 85th among FBS quarterbacks against the blitz with a 62.5 passing grade. And also doesn't help that the Alabama offensive line, which hand up I called the best in the country entering the year, they're currently 105th in team pass blocking grade. Now, I will say, though, Caden Proctor has not played yet. And Kalen DeBoer did say that he could be returning this week against Wisconsin. You bring him back, one of the better offensive tackles that we have in college football, as a huge return for them. But the receiving core is a little worrisome as well, because right now Ryan Williams is really the only receiver that has been consistent for Alabama. He's a 17-year-old freshman. He's the only receiver for Alabama with 80 receiving yards for the Crimson Tide this year. So that's a little worrisome for this Alabama passing game as of right now. And then Wisconsin defensively, they blitz at about an average rate. Right now they blitz at about a 38% rate, which is tied for 57th in the country. However, if Luke Fickell decides to send the house a little bit more against Milroe, they have the secondary that can bother these Alabama receivers. They entered the year with one of my 10 best secondaries in college football. They have star players like Hunter Waller and Ricardo Hallman as well. This is a really good secondary for Wisconsin that I think if Wisconsin blitzes Milroe and gets after him, they can bother him a little bit in this game, and that could be the recipe for Wisconsin to keep this a low-scoring game and maybe have a shot at winning this game.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Bama, they're kind of figuring it out in the passing game, but the blitz thing is a problem because it's been a problem since last year, both protecting the blitz.
Michigan won that game up just by blitzing Milroe, basically.
They've had problems protecting against the blitz for multiple years, and Milroe just doesn't get rid of the ball quickly like that. It's been shown time and again that he needs that 3.5 seconds to get back and take his time and think about whether he's going to pass or run, and sometimes he's going to scramble. If you speed him up, it really isn't any quick game in Alabama's offense, not with Milroe at least. So you're right, it's absolutely a problem, and I'd be very curious to see if Fickell ratchets that back up.
Yeah, so Dalton, you and I have disagreed on both games that we've previewed so far. Will we disagree on this one? Who do you have winning in Madison, Wisconsin?
I think this is a really bad matchup for Wisconsin. I do, unless somebody like a Will Pauling or a Bryson Green plays out of their absolute mind and shows us a level of football we haven't seen before. I've got Alabama 35-10. I just think Wisconsin is going to have a hard time scoring against Bama, especially when you consider they've had a reasonably hard time scoring against a Western Michigan and a South Dakota so far. I mean, even 27 points against South Dakota last week, and it was inconsistent, and some of that was due to South Dakota mistakes. There isn't a whole lot about this Wisconsin offense that I feel like is dynamic. At least I feel like with Bama, I know there's Milroe, and the receivers are potentially dynamic. We've seen some of that from Ryan Williams, Kobe Prentice last week, Jeremy Bernard. They're working on it, essentially, right? But Wisconsin, they weren't explosive last year, and they're not explosive now, and I'm not sure how they're going to score a lot of points in this game unless Alabama really – they're young in the secondary, so maybe they can scheme something up. But just man for man, I have a hard time seeing how Wisconsin's going to score a lot of points.
I'm with you. I really struggle seeing how Wisconsin can win this game unless it's like a 13-10 type game, honestly. So that's why I have Alabama winning this game 27-13. I do think the Wisconsin defense will force a few mistakes from Milroe that can make it a close game in the first half. But then he and the Crimson Tide, I think, will pull away in the second half when Tyler Van Dyke just can't really get anything going for that Wisconsin offense. And the Wisconsin defense is on the field for a lot of that game, and they can get gassed out, honestly. And at that point, Milroe will start to find Ryan Williams deep and something like that and end up winning this game by 2 scores. So I got Alabama winning that game 27-13. The first game that you and I are actually agreeing on, Dalton, in this preview.